Good evening. This is a special meeting and budget workshop of the Argyle ISD Board of Trustees. The time is 5:00 p.m. We will now determine if a quorum is established. We start with you. Frank Dixon.
Frank Dixon, place
Present. Perfect.
place 3.
Rich McDowell, present.
Justin Ford, present.
Matt Slayton, present.
Fiona McDade, present.
And I, Leanne Artho, am present. A quorum has been established. We will move into the pledges.
Okay, sounds good.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
We will move into our opening prayer. Heavenly Father, you know the needs of our students before we do. Please guide each of us in this room as we make decisions in the best interest of our students. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And since we do not have anyone signed up for public forum, we will go straight into the meeting. And the first item is our public notice, and Liz is going to take it from here.
Thank you. So this is a new requirement that was established by the legislative session, I believe the 89th legislative session, that requires us to include a taxpayer impact statement into our meeting agenda notices that goes into effect now. Anytime we're going to talk about the budget. So since this is a budget workshop, you get a taxpayer impact statement. So you will see this as a notice. It won't necessarily be on the agenda like it is, but it will be placed as the meeting notice for every meeting where it does talk about the budget. So there is a disclaimer in the taxpayer impact statement that says it's the most recent data that we have, and that it will change once we get certified data in late July, early August. So you'll see different numbers at that time, but this is the data that we have at this point. So that covers our new legislation. I think House Bill 1522, I believe.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, and now you're up.
Okay. Okay, so this is a budget and compensation workshop. We're going to go a little bit over the budget first, and then we're going to let Dr. Daniel talk about the compensation plan. We've had several meetings, of course, along the way. I know we started back in, I believe, February and March talking about next year's budget and beginning workshops. Tonight, what we'd like to do is look at the department budget update. We're going to go back over the outlook for the overall budget. Just kind of hit on the fund balance again. We like to bring that up a little bit at each meeting. And then we'll move into the compensation plan and the staffing phase 3 that we've talked about in the past. Okay, so department budgets. I know we've talked about this along the way, but just as a reminder, we moved a couple of years ago to a zero-based budgeting process for departments. We utilized 4 priority areas this year. In the past, we've had 3. We are currently reviewing the percent of the increase and decrease. We'll hit on those a little bit tonight, and then we're reviewing the alignment with the collaborative visioning plan. So we go through that collaborative visioning plan. We're on year 2 of that. We go through each item and make sure, is it in line with it, and then is there anything in the plan that is not included in somebody's department or campus budget, and do we need to pull something else back in? So we look at those as well. For the budget priorities, what the departments were given the priority of 1 through 4. 1 being essential, 2 being important and core support, 3 being enhancement or value added, and 4 being strategic or future focused. As we looked at these, we went through everything. The majority of what was put down was a priority 1 or 2. There was a little bit more in priority 3. There was very little in priority 4. What we've looked at funding is 1 through 3 with some exceptions, and going through and picking and choosing a little bit under the priority 3 section. So just as an outlook, and I couldn't get all of the departments on one sheet or you wouldn't be able to read it, it'd be so small. So this is broken up a little bit. But I just wanted to give you some input into why some of these percentages look a little different than others, and why they aren't all, you're not seeing like a 3% or a 5% across the board change. So we have these broken down in the best way we can with how they're, who's in charge of what type of budget, how we operate in the school in different ways. So the overall admin building, So if you look at some of these, they're smaller budgets, so any increase shows a large percentage, right? So we're gonna kind of skip over some of those, but athletics does show a little bit of an increase, but we're adding a middle school campus which participates in athletics. That does increase their overall budget. If we look back at all the line items and we go through what is the increase without GMS, we're looking at a 9% increase, which in looking through, and just want y'all to know we've gone through every single line item. We look at everything of, why did this one go up? Why did this one not? What happened here? Did we leave something out? And with looking through their line item, the 9% seemed reasonable. You do get 18 though when you add in GMS, and that's anytime we're going to add in a campus where their participation, right? Every event that you compete in, there's typically a fee with that. There's a fee for all officials. There's uniforms. There's costs for any type of added. If we had 3 teams one year, we wanted to go to 4 teams. There's added costs with that. So this includes all of that. Band shows a decrease. That has to do with their capital outlay. So every year their capital outlay is a little different. It depends on what instruments might be needed. A lot of the capital outlay for next year is included in FF&E for an opening of a campus. So that is a pretty big reduction on their budget as a whole for that year. So you're not really seeing a decrease in supplies or anything like that. They have had to increase some of those. Same thing, they've had to add GMS to their budget, but because of the high dollar instruments that were moved out to an FF&E, you see an actual decrease on their line item. So the board, we haven't really had the board as a separate department, but we're trying to track that a little bit differently. So we've pulled out some of those items. Again, it's a $5,800 increase. It does show as a large percent. However, though, because it's such a small budget, this is some additional training that we've tried to anticipate for next year. But again, it's a little skewed when you say 11%. It's a small amount in the overall scheme of things. Choir shows a very large percent there at 36%. Again, their budget is rather small, so when you add a campus to that, they have a choir at GMS. It does make that skew into a very large percentage, but the majority of everything there was adding a campus. Collaborative visioning stayed the same. Communications has an increase of 15%. The majority of that was some software that they have in their department, and anytime you grow, most of our software is done based on either a campus or a student count or an employee count, and as we grow, those costs of software increase. Construction is a small budget in the general fund, stayed the same. District-wide increased about 5%, which seemed in line. We're still looking at some of those things that we can do in that one just to reduce some of that percent across the district. In the finance department, we had a small decrease there at 7%. Again, it's a smaller budget, so 7,000 shows us a 7% decrease. Learner services, same thing. We had some high dollar line items last year. We don't have those as repeating, so you're going to see an overall decrease in their budget, even though a few areas may have had to go up, but overall it's a decrease. And then legal, we're estimating the same amount for next year as we do this year, and then we have to adjust as we go because you don't necessarily know those costs in advance. All right, for the maintenance department, you're going to get a 19% increase there. That is, the majority of that has to do with the operations of the GMS campus. So you take in grounds, you take in utilities, you take in all the different, utilities is a separate line item. You take in the grounds, the custodial, all the different things, and the majority of their increase, other than there's some inflation in other line items, has to do with GMS operations. Going into next, we've got the actual operations department. Most of that is some GMS operations, and then we had some radios that we needed to replace, which fall under that department. Police department, again, it's a little misleading. It shows a pretty big decrease. However, we had to purchase 2 vehicles this year. One was a replacement, one was addition. So that skews their budget look for next year. If you look at it without that in there, then they look like they're in line with what needs to move forward. Okay, I lost track of where we're at. Okay, rebranding, we're still estimating some costs to repaint some things next summer. We're trying to get as much done as we can this summer, but it's going to be a phased project. Region 13 contracts did go up a little bit. That is, there's different areas. I believe you saw those in May of what we use Region 11 contracts for. Security department, again, they had some one-time line items last year that we didn't have this year, so they're showing a decrease. Special programs the same way. They had some contracted services line items last year that we aren't anticipating for this year. Staff and student services, same thing. There was a software program I believe that they had been using that they're no longer going to use in the future, so that took a decrease in theirs. The superintendent shows 2%. It's $400 because it's such a small budget. You don't get much of a change there to cause a percentage increase. Technology shows a decent percentage, 38%. Technology has a couple of different things in there. One, we talked about in our budget amendment and our purchases that we're asking to move to a different ERP system. That falls under the technology department. Part of that cost comes in next year's budget. And then the rest of it is our software increases. Again, when you have costs based on either a student count or an employee count or a number of campuses, as those go up, our software cost goes up. So majority of that is there.
And those software costs, that's not necessarily student instructional software. That's any software we may be using in the district as well for operations or whatever, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Transportation, we have a couple of things going on here. One, we've increased our fuel cost. If y'all haven't seen, fuel costs are a little bit higher right now. If they stay that way, we don't feel like we have enough in next year's budget to stay the same, so we've increased that. We know we've got some additional routes that are coming on and some additional buses, so just even our maintenance line items, we increased in anticipation of those for next year. And then our last one is utilities. The majority of that comes in line with GMS and adding that campus there. And our energy manager was able to help us with some looking at what some projected costs may be on that campus. So overall, if you look at it, it's a 13% increase. Again, a couple of line items we know come in because of opening a campus. And so we felt like that fell really in line with our planning amounts and what we felt like would happen with our department budgets. We were within a couple $100,000, so we felt pretty good about that when we got done. I guess before I go, do you have any specific questions you want to look at before we move on? Okay.
I just want to say, Ms. Stewart and her department, but then also our department heads and our principals have done a great job. Building a budget from zero base is not the easiest thing to do because you have wants and needs, and they have a system in their department where they prioritize 1 through 4, she mentioned, and all of us, when we're working through things want to be a 1, but then she would go back and say, okay, well, let's talk through, not everything can be a 1, not everything can be a 2, and they've whittled that down, and so they've done a great job, helping work through those priorities and getting us to where we are with this, so thank you.
You're welcome, and that takes buy-in from everybody, from
Can
every
you give some
department head.
examples real quick of like what falls under the district-wide? I don't want it to appear as a catch-all to everybody, so just some examples of like what would fall within there.
So in district-wide, things like printer fees. So copier fees are a campus-based. Printer fees, we still have individual printers throughout the district. We have district-wide costs there. Give me 1 second and I'll pull up the detail. I can tell you a little bit more. Okay, so in this category, we estimate new teacher computers. So anytime we add staff, you've got to add a device. And so we're estimating a little bit larger there because we know we're going to open a couple of campuses and we'll need to buy those computers in the summer. There's also some campus budget contingencies. So when we budget with our campuses, we hold back 10%. If they meet or exceed their enrollment as of snapshot date, they get that 10%. So we hold that in a district-wide until it is distributed. We have things like a new classroom setup. So something that may not fall under setting up a new campus that might have FF&E. We still are growing in our individual campuses and they may have specialized furniture or equipment, so we have to anticipate that and put a budget in for that each year. We have some copier replacements. We aren't replacing copiers district-wide, but we do hold a small amount there when 1 or 2 might go out through the year. Things like above district athletics. So we do budget for that at the central office level, and then as people advance, we also have an above district academics, I believe, things like that, where you may not necessarily know what that amount is. It isn't necessarily part of their department budget, but it is a needed expense. So those are the main ones in there. You've got some small things in there like a UIL membership or some legal news and notices, some publications that we have to do. The tax appraisal fees that we have to pay to the appraisal district, that's another large one that's in there. So it kind of gives you an idea of maybe what be covered in there.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Just some of the examples. It all makes sense. You can just want to highlight it so it's slightly more detailed, but that's good. That's awesome. Thank you.
It's a good question to ask though, it's not a catch-all of just,
right.
Where because we haven't always had it set up that way, right?
We haven't. We used to, as we were smaller and as we grow, we were trying to make some changes. Everything was a catch-all with everything in central admin that wasn't handled by any anything else. And then we said, well, we really need to look at it a little bit differently. What may be district-wide? Then we had, kind of an admin building. What happened here? We started breaking out our departments, like finance got their own budget, staff and student services got their own budget. So we're trying to make things a little bit easier to delineate and track as we get a little bit larger. I mean, I would imagine if you compared us to another school, they're probably not going to have a district-wide, that they may categorize theirs differently based on who's in charge of what and what budgets fall everywhere. But that is just what seems to fit ours right now. But we do try and change that as we grow a little bit and try and capture some different things. And we may get to next year and go, oh, we've got to add this. Somebody else is over this. We're going to delineate it a little bit differently. So.
And I also just want to tell you I appreciate the breakdown. This is nice.
Yeah.
So we did start doing this, I think, a couple of years ago when we started looking at the zero-based budgeting, just to give a little bit bigger picture, so we weren't just giving you a lump sum. So, thank you. All right, so tentative budget outlook. This has been updated just a little bit. It really changed. What we updated was the revenue estimate. I looked at what our latest budget amendment is coming forward to you. We brought his information last month, action this month. And it's really, how does that affect anything in the future? And so we were able to make some small adjustments where we felt like they would be in the revenue. And that enabled us to make a small change on the staffing plan, phase 1 and 2. If you'll remember that we had talked about $5 million there every time we've talked, we were able to include that to $5.2 million. Now, it's not a huge change, but it still was a change in our planning, right? So we were able to make that change there. So that's the biggest thing that's changed in order to still keep it balanced. And you'll see that reflected in what's being asked in phase 3 and what can be covered. So still a balance looking forward. Still the fund balance outlook hasn't changed. I can tell you, I do believe the 25-26 will increase a little bit there. We're going to end the year better than where we're projecting right now, which will help then with the 26-27 outlook as well. So just a reminder, as we grow and our budget grows, 25% of $50 million is not the same dollar amount as 25% of $70 million. So in order for that to maintain at 25%, you really have to be adding money to fund balance every single year.
And
So.
will you just explain a little bit how you've done with some other people, in the years we open campuses?
Yes, ma'am.
It impacts that.
So, and this is just kind of my opinion of how I look at it, right? The years we open a campus, you are taking on some more expense in that first year, right? And so those years, it's a little bit harder sometimes to balance your budget. Sometimes on the years where we're not open a campus, we tend to see that we're able to put a little bit more in fund balance to try and maintain that 25% than what we've done in the past. So this year coming up, it's been a struggle. We've talked about that, trying to keep a balanced budget projection outlook and still add enough for a campus. Next year, we'll have 2 campuses that we're opening. We won't see the full effect of one of them because it is a building and that we already have, so you won't have the utilities or operations, but you will have the staffing and the supplies on it. So it is a little more difficult in those years to say, hey, we think we're going to grow our fund balance and in dollar-wise to be able to maintain that same percentage. But the years that we don't, those are the years that we do kind of make up a little bit of ground and get us back to that point. So growing districts, a shrinking district has just the opposite, where they're trying to make it, their fund balance is declining as well. We're all looking at trying to maintain that average somehow, but we all have different things that are pulling on our budgets and forcing our budgets. So for us, it's growth, and those years that you open a campus just a little more difficult. The year after you open is a little bit easier. So, okay, Dr. Daniel is going to discuss the compensation package now.
Okay. As you've heard in the past, this time every year, or at the new board orientation, we talked about this just a little bit, just a little background on our pay process. We work with TASB, and it's a process that we've been using with them for at least 10 years, I would think. Basically, the way that it works is they gather all of our pay data. We send them a data file. Every employee, what they make and how many days they work, and we send that to them, and they compare that pay to the market. And the market is whatever we want the market to be, and they help us define that, and you'll see who our market is, and you can get an idea of who they are, Denton, Northwest, Keller, places like that, but that's going to be on the next slide. And so they compare it to that to see kind of where your pay falls when you're comparing yourself to other districts. And then they build our pay structures. not on what they think it should be, they get input from us. Like we'll tell them can you build one based on 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever percentage we ask them to build. And then whichever one we can afford is the one and that's the one we're bringing to you tonight. So they build a pay structure, and then they send us a huge data file back, which is an implementation plan, and they make recommendations. Sometimes we take the recommendations, and sometimes we do not. One of the recommendations this year was to really look at your teacher pay and be careful with your adjustments when you're getting past I think it's the 10 years of experience, because of the state bonus that everybody got last year, and we want to make sure everybody maintains with that, and you'll see that in a minute. There's also something that we are still talking about, and this has come up a couple of board meetings back. It's been heard more than once, but some targeted adjustments or increases to some of the campus admin. So we're looking at that as well. The nice thing about this is all within the budget too. Mm-hmm. You saw that $2 million a minute ago that was set aside, and everything that we're requesting tonight is within the $2 million. And I went back, it's really close to the $2 million, a little too close for me, so. But Liz assured me that it was gonna be fine. So these are the districts that are considered our market, all in region 11 and 10. And they collect all of their data, and if they don't have it, then they go pull it themselves, because there's an opportunity in the fall for districts to share their pay data with TASB so that they can use it for things like this. You can see, I guess one didn't share, that was Lake Dallas. One of the things to note on this is when you're looking at enrollment, we're in the bottom of this group. We're in the bottom quartile of this group. So we're a lot smaller than a lot of these places that we're comparing our salaries to. It's always important to keep that in mind. Even though we're lower, we have to keep up with the Northwest and the Denton. This next slide was something that they provided to us. This is those districts that were on the previous slide. And these are teacher salaries only. Starting at year 0, they have different scales, one for 0, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And starting with year 0, they're ranked highest to lowest. HEB is the highest, typically has been for many, 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 many years. And then you'll see where we fall, which is right in between Carrollton Farmers Branch and Keller. Another thing to consider here is the number of teachers that we have compared to all of these other. I think the only district that's above us, if I remember correctly, was, with our size, Aledo. Aledo's no, we're for the number of people that we have, we're paying pretty decently compared to the market. But on this, it doesn't look so good, but it's in the bottom quartile. This next slide is what we're bringing as a recommendation tonight, and it's a 3% increase. In this pay scale looks very different than previous ones. Used to be you just look at year 5 and see what you made, but now there are some adjustments to it because of the not just because of the pay increase, but also the amount of money that the state was giving the teachers last year. I don't know if you remember, but they were getting, if you were, let's say 7 years of experience, you got $5,000. But it doesn't mean you get an extra $5,000 every year. So that's why you see the $2,500. So it's scaled. So they make all of it, and it gets really complicated when people are moving around, and it's not just 7 years is this. You have to consider that allotment as well. That column that says additional allotment, that is catch up. That's to catch up to make sure that those people that are at year 9, 10, 11 in certain years don't fall behind where they aren't making as much as they had previously.
And that's part of that TASB recommendation that we can either take or not take, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a recommendation. That column.
Yeah, I know, we're leaking over.
Okay, there's something dripping.
So-
That column where it says additional
Dripping.
adjustment, was something that they recommended. We didn't have to do it, but we decided to do that. So this is based on a 3% increase across the board. And then this is just another graph that I thought was interesting that they provide. I think it's a little bit deceiving, so I'm going to explain it to you. Our salary is the orange bar, and that is current salary. The blue is the market. So you can see we're behind the market on each of the years. And that's for the current school year, 25-26. The green dash line is where we would be using Model 2. That was the second model. That was the 3% model next year. And so you can see that it's above the market, but also the market is going to go up.
Hasn't
So-
adjusted yet.
So that's teacher pay. And then we are also bringing information and recommendation for a 3% of median for all other employees. That would include everybody else, student nutrition, maintenance, transportation, paraprofessionals, and administration. A few other compensation recommendations that we have talked about in some of the budget workshops, except for this first one, was something new that we talked about, I think just maybe last month, was an increase to the district contribution to insurance because of the increase in insurance. Went up at least 10% for medical insurance. So we're wanting to bring a proposal for $50 more a month the district would contribute to people that take medical insurance. And then paid pre-K. Paid pre-K is eligible right now for most of our teachers, but not all of our staff. And so this would include other staff members, like a life skills aide that has a pre-K kid. Well, they have to pay right now. This would cover that expense. And so we're anticipating, I think Dr. Jordan's been looking at numbers about possibly 10 maybe at the most, and it's $7,500 a kid. And then as far as, we also bring to you we have people that get paid extra for things, for coaching UIL, for, there's a list of them. And if you click that link at the top, you don't need to do it here, but the extra duty pay schedule, it has every single one of them there. But we did make some adjustments to that, or some additions, I should say. One of those being our elementary choir teachers currently don't receive a stipend like the other directors do, and they, as you probably all experienced at some point, they put a lot of time and effort into performances, and so this is to recognize that. There is currently a middle school art junior honor society, right? There's never been a stipend for that. There is one for high school, so we would like to add that as well. We now have somebody that will be running our AV, so there is a stipend for that, one of our teachers. And 6th grade theater did not have a stipend in the past, and they put on a performance as well and do above and beyond with their performances, so we are wanting to add that as well.
And does that also include the opening of Gibson and the stipends for opening Gibson, right? Okay.
It does. And then I think I've talked about this before. We're wanting to increase the stipends for our special education teachers that work with our life skills, XE, and behavior students. And then a small increase with our campus communicators. We have one campus communicator on every campus, and they're the ones that send out all of the campus communication, all of the information that you receive as a parent.
And they run the social media, which is after
There's a
hours.
lot, right. Okay, and then this is the breakdown of the totals. The pay increases, that's what the GPI is. The insurance supplement, pre-K, and the stipend increase comes just under $2 million, so it's within budget. Any questions about the compensation plan? We looked at a higher model because we want to pay our teachers as much as we can,
I was
but
going to ask.
we're also
like,
trying to.
Like Alito's number one. Is that what I'm understanding on like slide 12? It says Alito's number one in our salary, two more back, I think. Yeah, there. Is that saying that?
No, those
Oh,
are
that's just
that's
alphabetical.
just the
That's
list of
alphabetical.
districts.
Okay, got it. So are we top 5? Are we top
The next one, it
like 12?
So,
depends on if you're looking at the number of teachers. If you look at anybody under,
Northwest.
under 700 teachers, oops.
Let's see, that's what it's kind of hard for me to.
No, we're not gonna be top 5.
No, but because these are the number of teachers. But if you take like an Alito who's got 513 teachers, we have 368. The Little Elm 514. Those that are within that kind of that range, then yes, we're right there. We're right. Alito was 63. We were 61.1, and then the next one down was below us. So we were. That's just the group of 16 school
Right.
districts. But if you start lumping them by the number of teachers, then yes.
Is it fair to say Alito's more commercial? Whatever.
Maybe.
Okay.
But then that's just the beginning too, beginning salary, because you go across there.
Right.
A lot of times you may be higher than somebody in a 5 to 10 year range or.
Okay.
And then I remember in years past, there was always a race like who pays the most as a beginning teacher, and I always remember that school. I don't want to keep saying their names over and over, but always being at the top, or some Dallas or something like that.
But those numbers in the middle are really important when you're a district that's wants to retain good teachers through over the years and not so much worried about that very beginning first year teacher salary.
Something else I'd like to bring up is that our students go to school 168 days, and many of those other district students are going to school 180 days. And so the number of days that our teachers are with students is less than many of those other districts. And so the time that they are working planning is very different than the time they're working with children. And so I think that's something else when staff members come here that is such a huge bonus, is the number of, they're all working 187 days,
Right.
but only 168 of those days in Argyle ISD are with students, and they get so many more days to plan and to look at data and prepare for their lessons. So something I like to
Oh, that's
remind
good.
staff members about.
No, that's a good point.
So knowing that the market shifts up every year, have we ever taken a pay philosophy as a district, like market plus 2%, to try to at least stay with the market as that shifts every year? Or do we ask them to model anything like that? to
No,
get
I
us-
mean, we haven't done that. I mean, we do have a model that is not 3%. It's a little bit more, but it's not going to be within the budget that we have set right now.
I'd be curious to see what, if we did a 3.5 or 4%, obviously it would put you over the budget, but then what would you guys suggest cutting to make the budget? If we prioritize the salary to be 4%, right? Because if the data that was on there was from 25, 26, right?
Right.
So as other districts have already given raises or going to give raises, the whole line, like you said, just the whole line shifts up, right?
Right. That's why I said that graphic is a little deceiving, because it looks
Right.
like you're above it, but you're really not, because you don't know what the next.
Right, so we'll be mixed in with everyone else, maybe some similar spot where we are now, maybe up or down a spot or two, but I'd be curious to see what you guys recommend if we said, hey, let's do 3.5 or 4%. I know it's percentage-wise, it's gonna be a lot of money, right? But what do you want to cut to balance it? you
Well,
know?
one of the things that we did do, Liz and I did, and we met, is we looked at a 4% teachers only, and then a lower percentage for other staff, and it was still out. I don't remember what the number was, but we couldn't afford it.
It was still over the two. I think to answer that question, when we did the 4 priorities with the staff, it was compensation increase, and then the staffing, we would have to pull back on some of the staffing requests that we have. I mean, that's where we would have to take it from, is
Yeah.
going to be the staffing request. The positions that we asked, the increased positions, would be where that would have to come from. In order to increase the compensation, it would come out of staffing, because the district
where-
budgets aren't enough to move the needle would that be correct, Liz?
Yeah, there's the insurance supplement as well. I mean, that's something that, about 50 to 55% of staff, somewhere in there. I think it was somewhere in that range that take it, that you could put towards salary for all. I mean, there's some different
Right.
looks that you could give it, but it depends on where you want to put the priority. So.
But I think if you were to go to try to look at a market plus, like he mentioned, a market plus a 3%, or to go to that 4%, we would be looking at having to pull back on the staff positions. That's the only place would give us enough to capture that. I was trying to pull.
Because that's where most of the budget is in your staffing.
And when you first came here, that was our budget fall, kind of with the, what was the name of the transition grant?
Formula transition.
That's what it was.
Because it was $4.5 million that
Yes,
first year.
and it dropped off, and so we did make a lot of adjustments to the actual staffing plan. And the feedback we got from a lot of educators was, hey, we do want the compensation, but we really like having the staff on campus to meet the needs of the students. And there's kind of the whole quality of life at work, you know, like how many students you're dealing with in a classroom and those kinds of things. I feel like the feedback we've gotten is they definitely want compensation, but not at the expense of everything else. That makes their day-to-day easier.
Those are good questions for sure.
The last part of this isn't really part of the compensation plan. This is more the staffing plan for phase 3. We started this back in March, and we held off on phase 3 because we didn't think we were going to be able to afford it, and we made some modifications to it, and now I believe that, Ms. Stewart can correct me, but these are the positions that we believe that will work within the budget for next year in phase 3. Remember, there's already been many other positions that have already been approved. And those are those positions that you see there: teacher residency, special education aides, 2 more at Hilltop because we're wanting to split a special education classroom. We did have that counseling position that we were opening for, if you click that link that says staffing plan phase 3, it actually opens up the detail on it. But that counselor, we were looking at a full year position as an overlap. Now we cut it to a half year instead. And then as far as operations go, a bus monitor, a maintenance position, which we had taken out 2 or 3 of those, and we think we can add 1 more. And then the administrative assistant, the part with that, which again, most of you have heard this presentation, this part of the presentation. And that budget impact is $261,750.
Each percentage is about $550,000, I believe. That's what I'm looking at in the report. Each percentage increase, it's about $500,000.
Yep, yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And this whole budget is based, as you always do, conservatively on what you believe July 25th is going to come out to look like, roughly.
Roughly, and
And
what
student
how many
enrollment.
students will show up
And how
and
many
how
students
often
will
they show
show
up
up.
and what their characteristics are.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the 2 biggest things, in which you don't know ahead of time, and we won't know. I mean, you aren't going to know your enrollment attendance. Now, we'll get a good look when we open our doors in August. Usually after the first week, you kind of got to, you have some late enrollees, so that typically that second week we get a pretty good idea of are we anywhere close, but it changes throughout the year. Historically, the last several years we've grown through the year. Some years more than others, but we have continued to grow through the year.
Okay, anything else? Good, thank you, Dr. Daniel.
You bet. This is yours, I guess.
Yes, I think I have one more slide.
Oh, 1 more slide.
Just the next steps, just a reminder of what the next meetings. June 15th, the compensation plan will bring back to you for action. July 20th, regular board meeting, and then August 24th is when we plan to present our budget and tax rate adoption. If you'll remember, we moved that a week to help with the new requirements on tax rate calculation, to give me a little bit more time to get those values done for the August meeting, to try and keep it together rather than pushing it to September. So this is our last workshop for the budget. So I thank y'all for sitting through that and giving us some input and your questions that you asked through that. So, but we'll start with regular meetings after this. So
Thank you.
thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Liz.
Under the authority of the Texas Government Code 551, Subchapter D, the board will now go into executive session at 5:39 PM to discuss 551.074 personnel matters and public officers, 551.071 consultation with attorney, 551.072 deliberation regarding real property. When we return from closed section, we will take action on agenda items. The time is 8:03 p.m. and the board is back from executive session. We will now discuss the action items. 8A is the vacancy on place 7 on the Argyle ISD Board of Trustees. As communicated to staff and community last week, the board is considering a vacancy in place 7 following Josh Westrum's resignation. In accordance with the law of Texas Education Code 11.060, and when a vacancy occurs on the board and more than a year remains in the term of the position vacated, the remaining trustees have 2 options. 1, fill the vacancy by appointment until the next trustee election, which will occur in May of 2027, and fill the vacancy for the unexpired term. Or 2, order a special election in November to fill the vacancy for the unexpired term. In accordance with the holdover doctrine, Mr. Westrum remains a board member, active or absent, until his place is filled. Any qualifying community member interested can email the board president for an application to be considered for appointment. The board will consider qualified candidates on Monday, June 15th, at the next regular board meeting. I will entertain a motion for item 8A.
I move that Argyle ISD Board of Trustees appoint an individual to fill the vacant place 7 position on Argyle ISD Board of Trustees at the June 15th, 2026 board meeting, and that a board call for the place 7 position to be placed on the ballot at the next regular trustee election in May 2027 to fill the remainder of the unexpired term.
Mr. Slayton with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Frank Dixon with a second. Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye and raise your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving on to action item 8B. Liz Stewart?
Yes, this is a resolution that will authorize the superintendent to negotiate and put us under contract for land, or any future or current land dealings.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to consider the resolution authorizing the superintendent to execute instruments for the purchase of real property for district use.
I move to approve 8B as presented.
Thank you. Mr. Slayton with the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Rich McDowell with the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The time is 8:06 and we are adjourned.